Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage 2013 CAHR Conference co-chairs, Dr. Bob Hogg, Dr. Mark Hull, and Dr. Neora Pick.
Good afternoon, and welcome to Vancouver and to the 22nd CAHR Conference. We are very excited to have you here. I would like to start the ceremony by inviting Elder Mary Charles from the Musqueam Nation to open the conference with traditional prayer and blessings. We are honored to have her here with us. Please welcome Elder Mary Charles.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm so very honored to be here this evening to welcome you, not only to Vancouver, but our Musqueam traditional territories. I live on the Musqueam First Nations. It's about 15 minutes from here. So I feel right at home, and I thank you all for the great work that you do. With all my heart, I thank you. You're all so very special. And as we do in our tradition, I'll start our evening with a little prayer. Thank you, Great Spirit, for today. So much like yesterday, and yet so very special. Thank you for family, friends, casual acquaintances, and strangers I meet only once. They're all part of your plan and in my life for a reason. Bless them today, Great Spirit, as you meet their needs and guide them accordingly to your will. Let us be one with our brothers and sisters in love and peace. Make us strong mentally, physically, and spiritually to lead the way for future generations and make this world a better place to live. May all your blessings and kindness be bestowed on everyone here this evening. Near or far, together or apart, keep our loved ones close until we meet again. May your days be rich with joy. May your successes be frequent. May you have peace and comfort. And may you all know how great you are. CIHR. CIHR, and my dialect is thank you. I thank you for this great honor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary, for your kind address and for your prayer. My fellow co-chairs and I are pleased to welcome delegates from across Canada to Vancouver for the 22nd Annual CAHR Conference. We are fortunate to be in a wonderful venue and to have such wonderful weather. We can hope that it remains sunny until Sunday, but that's unlikely. This is Vancouver. In fact, in North Van, it's raining right now, probably. Can I have the organizing committee, and obviously the co-chairs are already standing, to stand or to wave? So please. I just want to thank everyone for their hard work on this conference. Without them, this conference wouldn't have happened. Our theme this year is Innovations to Address Complex Challenges. Over 70,000 men, women, and children are living with HIV/AIDS in Canada, and we face ongoing challenges in reaching out to communities at risk, challenges in engaging individuals in care, and challenging managing therapies for HIV and co-infections such as hepatitis C. We hope this conference will highlight new approaches to HIV testing strategies for those still undiagnosed, new strategies to recognize and overcome stigma, and innovative programs for engagement and retention in care. This year, we have a record number of submitted abstracts, over 460, and the highest number of delegates since Montreal in 2008. This year, because of that, we have added a number of new events and innovations here at CAHR. In an effort to deal with the record number of posters, 305 in total, and 193 in EPI and social science tracks, we have expanded the poster session with a separate session for Friday and Saturday, and extended poster viewing hours. We also have an oral poster session on Sunday morning for the top posters in EPI and social science tracks. We also have 2 new special sessions on Saturday afternoon highlighting peer research and HIV and the law. And on Sunday morning, we have a special pediatric session that will review the Canadian experience with early therapy in neonates and potential functional care, a cure. CAHR has also, if you have a phone, has added a new app. So it's not available for the BlackBerry, but it will be soon, next year. To improve your conference experience. And also this year we'll be making all plenary sessions available online after the conference. So you have an opportunity to see me again and again, or our conference co-chairs. Anyhow, we hope that you have an excellent opportunity to learn and have fun, and welcome to Vancouver. I would like to take this opportunity to announce the community scholarship recipients. Because there's so many, I would just like them to stand right now and for us to give them our recognition. Please stand. Congratulations, everyone.
I now will announce the academic scholarships. Basic Science Scholarship, Daniel Donahue and Rosemary McCloskey. Please stand up if you are here. Clinical Sciences Scholarship, Chanson Broom and Kristen Sokalski. Epidemiology and Public Health Sciences Scholarship, Warren Mikelow and Catherine Muldoon. I hope I pronounce it right. And Social Sciences Scholarship, Wesley Oakes and Margot Pierce.
We've had a number of recipients for scholarships in vaccine research. Please stand if you're here. Aurélie Claire-Buhou, Elsab Duplessis, Cameron Hake, Kevin Henry, Lee McClarty, Armstrong Marira, Paulina Polika, and Vanessa Laqualesh. Please stand if you're here, and a round of applause. I also have the pleasure of introducing to the stage our CAHR Council President, Dr. Jonathan Angel, who probably doesn't need a lot of introduction to people in the audience, but for people who don't know him, in addition to his role on CAHR, Jonathan is a professor of medicine at the University of Ottawa, senior scientist at the Ottawa Health Research Institute, and is the director of the HIV clinic at the Ottawa Hospital. Jonathan.
Welcome, everybody, and I first want to thank Bob, Mark, and Neora and the entire organizing committee on a great program this year, and you'll see over the next couple days what a great program it is. As president, it's an honor to take part in the official opening of the 22nd annual Canadian Conference on HIV and AIDS Research, or CAHR 2013. So as the president, I want to take this opportunity to recognize the members of CAHR Council for their hard work and volunteer commitment over the last year in setting CAHR's direction. So the names are on the board, but I'll list them so you know who they are. So because I also want to emphasize some of them. So Bob Hogg, who's worked obviously incredibly hard as conference chair, is the president-elect. So so in 2 days, I guess, after the AGM, he'll be responsible, and he'll be up here next year welcoming everybody to CAHR. So big a round of applause. Bill Cameron, who's not here, and Bill no awards for Bill this year, but Bill's a close friend and colleague of mine, and Bill has spent a great effort over the past six years to as president-elect, to as past president, really committed to the mission of CAHR, and as you'll see if you come to the AGM, how CAHR has grown over the past 6 or 8 years, and Bill, a lot of that is really Bill can take credit for. Unfortunately, couldn't be here, and he doesn't like being promoted, but I don't hesitate to promote him. Curtis Cooper, who I also have the pleasure of working with, he's a treasurer. He'll take the credit for how well CAHR is doing, and that's fine. Carol Strike, I don't think, you can stand up, Carol, but I don't think you really want to. Terry Howard, so he's our local, our Vancouver local representative on CAHR Council. He's served well, and he's, okay. And I guess Terry has helped, along with some of the staff who will introduce later, has kind of really brought CAHR. He's been a promoter of all the social networking. I can't see because of the lights, but Terry, I think without Terry, the rest of the old folks on CAHR would say whatever, do whatever you like about the apps and Twitter and blah blah blah. But I think because of Terry, it's really moved forward. He's a big promoter, and he continues to tell us that. I don't know how many friends he's got to be friends of CAHR on Facebook, but I think his pets are also friends of CAHR, so it's good for CAHR. Sarah Green, sorry for the rest of you, I'm not going to say a lot about you. Sarah Green, Matthias Gata, Stu Skinner, and Peggy Milson are all very valued members of CAHR Council. Now. I've got speaking. You can tell I'm reading this bit because I have speaking notes, and on my notes there's no recognition of the people that really do all the work at CAHR, and that's the staff, the executive director and staff, and they'd like to be a bit of behind the scenes, and I think that's fine, but they certainly deserve a lot of the credit. And we've had a fabulous executive director who's kind of largely responsible for again the successes of CAHR over the past few years. So Andrew Matejcic, who's here, and many of you will know, and a lot of the success of the organization are his doing. I can take credit for hiring him, but I really don't deserve any of that credit. And Aaron Love and Shelley Minot, who also work for CAHR, have worked tirelessly, both for the organization and for the conference. So if you really want to see the successes of CAHR as an organization, I urge you to come to the AGM and see what we've done over the past year and where things are. Obviously, the conference is the highlight of the year's activities, but there's a lot more that goes on kind of behind the scenes. Many of you will be familiar with it, but the AGM will highlight a lot of those things. So I'm probably way over my time, but that's too bad. I'd also like to thank the many organizations who chose to hold ancillary meetings alongside the conference this year. There's a lot of requests, and the conference organizing committee does a great job of sorting that out. I don't get to do any of that, and I'm glad, but there's a lot of important work that goes on before the meeting, and that's also an important component of the conference. And then, of course, the sponsors, without whom their contribution, none of this would be possible. And I think we're going to see the names of the sponsors come on the board, and I'll read them. So if you get to see these guys, the people that your sponsors, either around the meeting or at their booths, I think it's a good opportunity to thank them. VIV, Government of Canada, Bristol-Myers Squibb, Merck, the CAHR, Gilead, Janssen, AbbVie, the CTN, and their supporters, the Alliance Coordinating Office, Public Health Agency of Canada, RxD, Vertex, and Simon Fraser University. So they're, without them, this event wouldn't happen. CAHR is also proud to support each year, in partnership with CIHR and industry sponsors, master's and doctoral research students. This year's master's awardees are, I think we have the names here, Farshad Azimi. I guess you can stand up if people can, are they coming up? Or, no? No? Okay, stand up. If you're here, Farshad Azimi, Tyler Tulloch, and Deanna Zanet. Oh. What's that? Okay, yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay, so now it's great to have everyone here, and now I'd like to introduce Rainer Engelhardt. Rainer's the Assistant Deputy Minister, Infectious Disease Prevention and Control Branch of the Public Health Agency of Canada, and really appreciate you coming here on the notice you're given, and look forward to your greeting.
Well, my folks tend to think that I do a lot of reading of their prepared notes, but sometimes I diverge from that, which gives them great worries. Well, first of all, I think I'd like to say that the Public Health Agency of Canada has been a strong supporter of the activities of CAHR as an organization, and certainly of the activities of the individual scientists who are involved in CAHR, to try and bring the whole HIV/AIDS situation under control. As we know, it's something that continues to plague us. And in that sense, it's my honor almost to be here to try and give you a little bit of an address. So good evening. I'd like to congratulate really the conference organizers in a formal sense for putting together this impressive conference program, which, when I've looked through the pages that were there, really is that. It's sort of a statement of what is now in HIV research, and also what is now in Canada's contribution internationally to that whole sector. And that's particularly important for us in the Public Health Agency. I mean, that was introduced as being the ADM for Infectious Disease Prevention and Control. It is about prevention and control. So that's why we're here. And we have a recognition, I think, for our research value in Canada, and especially also, or just as well, in other countries internationally. I want to note really that there's a sort of a new and increased focus on other prevention technologies than the vaccines. I know we initiated a lot of work in vaccines and continue that work in vaccines because that gives the greatest promise for an eventual control, but there are certainly many other new and evolving technologies and innovations that are coming that need to be brought to bear, such as our antiretroviral therapy. Altogether, really the development of a safe and effective HIV control program is really the promise of ending the epidemic in the longer term. I want to say a couple of words about sort of reiterating the Government of Canada's commitment. We've been engaged in supporting HIV/AIDS research for a long time, and we continue to support that. The commitment remains, and that commitment is there to support our Canadian research and is also there to support efforts that are going on internationally. I mean, since 2006, Government of Canada has invested almost $600 million to address HIV and AIDS in Canada. It's not small monies. So, and this has been done predominantly through two programs: the federal initiative to address HIV/AIDS in Canada, which is formal term, and the Canadian HIV Vaccine Initiative. And I like to say that I'm a systems guy. I like to say that those programs are not run independently. They are run in an integrated fashion, and increasingly so, integrating their efforts with what's going on independently in academia, separately in other countries, And more, I think we're taking the approach federally, more than federally, I think just generally nationally in Canada all over, that we need to address HIV and AIDS as well as other issues that are there, but HIV and AIDS in a more integrated systems approach. And I'm proud of seeing what our Canadian researchers are doing as far as their part is concerned to bring that together. So a key focus of Canada in supporting science and research related to HIV and AIDS is to help better understand the current realities of HIV/AIDS. I mean, this is, as was said, co-infections such as hepatitis C and others, related disease factors that really exacerbate or otherwise complicate the long-term survival of individuals living with HIV, including as diverse areas such as, which hadn't typically been thought about, at least federally, for a number of years, but are thought in that context now, such as mental health. That's part of the picture. And overall, simply to promote innovation in prevention, care, treatment, and support. And it's all part of that, really, to foster development of new technologies. So CAHR, and the CAHR conference in itself, as I said, plays a critical role in supporting Canadian scientists to develop the research, develop the knowledge, and to disseminate that knowledge to help grow the knowledge base within Canada and grow the knowledge base internationally. Pleased to provide that financial support to CAHR, including smaller or lesser amount to this conference. So investments in HIV research from the Government of Canada has been carried out through, for instance, the Canadian Institute of Health Research, CIHR, that has increased substantially over the past 10 years. I mean, in 2011-12, almost $46 million has been invested through CIHR alone to support HIV and AIDS research. Some 518 individual study programs have been supported with that. And Canadian investors who've been supported by these grants, I mean, many of them are here with us this evening, are really, as I said, at the forefront of that response to HIV and AIDS. We have a great international reputation for the work that we do. So we continue to support the research that we're doing, continue to support long-term strategies to bring the epidemic under control. And I guess ultimately, from a federal perspective, it's still that holy grail that's up there, which is the discovery and effective vaccine. And it's really what we're looking for ultimately, notwithstanding there are other measures as well. You know, as a major investor, CIHR remains committed to invest strategically. Mark Willett is here, and I think Mark would say that. Committed, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but remains committed to invest strategically in HIV research, actively implementing the CIHR HIV Research Initiative strategic plan, and expects to continue to support the development of research capacity to ensure that Canada continues to contribute strongly to national and international efforts to end the epidemic. A couple of words about a very specific and unusual program from an international perspective, and that's the Canadian HIV Vaccine Initiative, CHVI. That had, I guess, a somewhat difficult early growth period, but it's developing now into something that is really productive and also demonstrates how multiple sectors, as I said, you know, science integration, systems integration, how different sectors, different departments, different mandates, different organizations, public and private, can actually work together to try and solve a problem such as HIV and AIDS. You know, since its inception in 2007, the CHVI contributed towards that development of it's focused on vaccines, of an effective and globally accessible vaccine, promoting greater collaboration between researchers in Canada, and the impact that they would have on low and middle income countries, particularly in Africa. And that's not without consequence to Canada. Not only does it promote our activities and support the activities and development within Canada, but it also helps to address the issue of HIV outside of Canada. And we all know, I think, that the impact of what happens in the rest of the world is significant with respect to HIV in Canada. So, I mean, moving forward on the CHVI, we know that our partner in that, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, remains committed to it. And we're hoping for even a greater future in the whole approach as we go forward. So, not to belabor it any further. In conclusion, I'd like to thank you for being here. I'm proud to be here with you on behalf of the Government of Canada, and welcome you all to this conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those words and your presence here at the meeting. It's very much appreciated, Rainer. So now I have the pleasure of introducing Mark Wainberg. There are few, if any, here today that are not aware of Mark's tremendous contribution to fighting AIDS and HIV, for previous, current, and future efforts all. So Mark is currently the Lady Davis Institute's HIV/AIDS Research Access, or head of the Lady Davis Institute's HIV/AIDS Research Access and director of the McGill AIDS Center, professor of medicine and microbiology and immunology at McGill University, and well known for the initial identification of 3TC as an effective antiviral drug, along with multiple contributions to the field of HIV drug resistance. His current research focuses on novel concepts in preventing HIV infection in developing countries. Mark has also been recognized with numerous distinctions, most recent of which was the 2013 CIHR CMAJ Top Canadian Achievements in Health Research Award, which I just learned. Congratulations. Mark, please.
Merci beaucoup, Jonathan. Merci, mesdames et messieurs. Je voudrais encore une fois remercier tout le monde pour ce grand honneur que vous m'avez accordé, notamment il y a une conférence qui est nommée après moi, qui sera donnée bientôt par Dr. Liviana Calzavara, une grande amie et quelqu'un que je respecte énormément. So, ladies and gentlemen, I have to welcome you to what will be another in the series of Mark Wainberg pre-memorial lectures. I said it's a great honor, and I must tell you that last night when I was speaking with Liviana about her presentation, I noticed that she was nervous. She'll be up relatively soon to give her talk. I noticed that she was fairly nervous, and I said, you know, you probably worked very hard to prepare this talk. And she said, yes. And I said, you know, at my age, there's a 50-50 chance that I could be dead by tomorrow night. She said, that's what I'm nervous about. I'd have to completely change my lecture. So, you know, science is very difficult. I'm reminded of a story of a scientist who perhaps had a couple of drinks too many at dinner. It happens. It's been known to happen. Maybe that's one of the reasons now when you go to some dinners, they no longer serve wine. Also, CIHR rules prohibit the use of grant money toward alcoholic consumption. But anyway, this scientist perhaps was taken out by a drug company, drank a bit too much, and driving home, made a wrong turn and got on the expressway going the wrong way. Anyway, they announced on the radio that there's someone going the wrong way on the expressway. And his wife heard this and called him on his cell phone and said, honey, did you hear there's someone going the wrong way on the expressway? Please be careful. He said, not just one person, there are 1,000 people going the wrong way. So that's how science is sometimes. You've got to fight against the flow. You've got to be with it, but sometimes you have to be prepared to take chances. And I'm sure that all of us who work in HIV understand this lesson very, very well. So let me tell you one of my dreams. I dream that over the next short while, and in part because of the Canadian effort to find a cure for HIV, that we will in fact succeed in either finding a cure or finding a vaccine that will completely eliminate the spread of this disease. And that would mean no more AIDS. That would mean perhaps no more need for conferences like this. And very importantly, it would mean no more Mark Wainberg pre-memorial lecture. So with that, I say thanks to all of you, and merci beaucoup, et au plaisir.
Thank you, Mark. You've actually made me nervous to follow after you on the stage, so I thank you for that as well. It's a great honor for me as a co-chair and on behalf of my other co-chairs to welcome to the stage our 2013 Mark Wainberg lecturer, Dr. Liviana Calzavara. Dr. Calzavara is a sociologist and professor at the University of Toronto Dalai Lama School of Public Health. She's the director of the CIHR Social Research Center in HIV prevention, and since 1984 has led multiple studies both in Canada and internationally in Russia and China. Her research covers a wide area of fields, looking at risks and incident infections and the effectiveness, more importantly, of public health interventions and community interventions amongst drug users, men of sex with men, prisoners, and Aboriginal communities. She's played a leadership role in Canada, serving in planning and policy as the co-chair of the Scientific Committee of AIDS 2006. She's been a CAHR co-chair and president, and has been the co-chair of the Ministerial Council and an inaugural member of the CIHR HIV/AIDS Research Advisory Committee. Please welcome to the stage Dr. Calzavara.
Wow. Thank you, everyone. It's truly an honor to be asked to give the Mark Wainberg lecture. I join a distinguished group of past lecturers, including, in order of most recent, Ken Rosenthal, James Urbinski, Françoise Barré-Sinoussi, Eleanor Matika-Tyndale, Michel Allery, Frank Plummer, Michel Bergeron, Julio Montaner, Martin Schechter, Catherine Hankin, and Eric Art. So for me, having been involved with CAHR since its founding in 1991, and to see all of my friends and colleagues, I feel, as Mark was saying, very nervous about this presentation, simply because I've been down the road thinking about the past, the present, and the future, and this is what this lecture has forced me to do. And I have wonderful memories. It almost feels like my memorial talk, but anyhow. These are the conflicts that I have to declare. Not your typical ones, but well, I've known and admired Mark Wainberg, the outspoken man, the remarkable scientist, for over 25 years. I first saw him in action in 1989 when he chaired the 5th International AIDS Conference in Montreal, one of the 3 that he's brought to Canada. When he chaired the 2006 Toronto International Conference, as the scientific program co-chair, I worked closely with him over the 2 years, and I got to see the scientist, the politician, the advocate, and the mentor at his best. He mentored me through the pitfalls and challenges, and he demonstrated genuine interest in my scientific work and career. This despite the fact that our scientific backgrounds are at the opposite end of the continuum, with Mark living in his wet lab and I in my dry lab. My interactions with Mark and other biomedical and clinical researchers have contributed to my approach, acceptance, and success in leading multidisciplinary team grants. And I thank all of you. And of course, I thank all of my fellow epidemiologists and social scientists for their support through the years. While brilliance and commitment to innovation are prevalent among HIV researchers, and every one of you should be congratulated for your work. Advocacy is a rare trait. What has constantly struck me the most about Mark is his passion and willingness to speak out at injustices and in action. Mark, I thank you for being my role model. I wish you many, many long years of life. And my lecture tonight will follow in your footsteps, or try to follow in your footsteps. And I will speak out about the unspoken forces that shape our research and the battle to conquer HIV and AIDS. Applying an historical lens, as the wrinkles on my picture show, I've been around for a while, I will identify and discuss some of the structural forces that shape how we do research and what research is done. In this context, when I speak of structural forces, I mean policies, programs, practices, norms, and expectations of governments, funding bodies, academic institutions, and society overall. These powerful forces are seldom challenged, sometimes invisible, and rarely the focus of research or open dialogue. When they are the topic of discussion, it is usually behind closed doors, while those who speak out may see or be seen as voices of the disgruntled. I will reflect on the early years of the HIV epidemic in Canada, the role and clarity of goals and the ways in which our national strategies were developed to meet those targeted goals, and goals were revisited on a regular basis. I will argue that while the overarching goals are still in place, they have become less coordinated, more contested, in part a reflection of the complexity of the evolving epidemic, but in large part due to these structural forces. I will propose that it's time to reinitiate a national discourse and agenda setting in order to refocus our efforts, but to do so, we will require that we consider and account for the unspoken structural forces that shape our research approach and efforts. As researchers, we hold ourselves accountable, and we are held accountable by the state for the state of the progress and fight against HIV. However, rarely in national public forums do we pose the question of how research and HIV epidemic are being impacted by policies, funding bodies, the practices and policies of academia, and societal norms and expectations. I will assert that unless we pose these questions and appropriately respond, we are impeding research efforts to eliminate HIV transmission, to improve health and well-being for all, and to find a cure. Just as CAHR has asked that we disclose any actual or perceived conflicts of interest, I feel that you need to know where I'm located within the Canadian HIV context and history. Over the last 29 years, I have experienced the negative and positive effects of these structural forces, and I will talk about. I have participated in their creation, and at times successfully and unsuccessfully challenged them. In 1984, I gave up my Shirk postdoctoral fellowship when I accepted a position with the Toronto Sexual Contact Cohort Study. The study's primary goal was to identify and quantify sexual risk behavior among men who have sex with men. And the study was initiated before we knew or even could test for the HIV virus. The results from that study were instrumental in the creation of early safer sex guidelines. Despite the fact that there were fewer than about 150 reported cases at the time in Canada, the fear, urgency, and commitment within the gay community and researchers was palatable. The experience continues to drive and shape my work to this day. After the death of the lead investigator, my mentor, Dr. Randall Coates, in 1991, I quickly managed to establish myself as an independent researcher, and by the late 1990s, I had expanded my work to countries with nascent HIV epidemics, including Russia and China. And I became more and more involved in professional services and volunteering to shape our political response to the epidemic. I sat and was actively engaged in many of the bodies that I will talk about today. As we all know, incredible progress has been made over the last 3 decades in understanding the virus, and important advances have been made in prevention and treatment. But the pace at which we deliver must be maintained, if not improved. After dramatic reductions in HIV infections in Canada, we saw an increase in infections in the mid-1990s that has stabilized at around 3,000 new infections per year. According to the Public Health Agency of Canada's latest surveillance report, an estimated 71,300 people in Canada have been infected with HIV. The number of new infections in 2011 was estimated at 3,175, which is slightly lower than in 2008, when there were an estimated 3,355 new infections. However, this is hopefully the start of a downward trend, but I have my doubts. Figure 1 to the right shows the estimated number of new infections per year between 1975 and 2011. For those of us who saw the epidemic, dramatic decline in incidence in the early 1990s, seeing the resurgence in the late 1990s onward has been very disappointing. We had hoped that the slope would continue to decline over the years. Polaris, Ontario's HIV seroconversion cohort, which reported this disturbing trend in 1998 at CAHR, made the headlines in the summer of 2000 as we headed into the Durban AIDS conference. At first, the study results were ignored. Actually, it took 2 years. Or they were contested as not representative of all MSM. Figure 2 on the left shows new infections per year by exposure category. We see that infections in all exposure categories have continued to increase, with the exception of injection drug users, which is the line in red. MSM continue to comprise the greatest proportion of new infections. They represent 47% of new infections in 2011. Can I, not that I'd be able to see very many, but I'd like to have a show of hands. How many of you were born in 1980 or later in the room? Wow, okay, I am getting old. For those of you who were born into a world with HIV, it may be a normal state to have people continuing to become infected in Canada. I was sexually active in a world that didn't know HIV. And I readily acknowledge that we've all worked hard, as I've indicated, to reduce new infections and should be commended for getting them to this level. But I truly believe we can't be complacent and accept this as the way things are going to be and will continue to be. I am troubled that my vision of a world with no new infections is shared by fewer and fewer as time progresses. Some would argue that we need more resources if we're to get ahead of the epidemic. This is unlikely to happen. I want us to think of what we can do with what we have currently. My presentation is meant to challenge us to think of structural factors that impede our research progress, things that we can do better. I want to rekindle the sense of urgency that we felt in the early years of the epidemic. So back into kind of memory lane for some people. To date, there have been 3 national strategies. The first national strategy, entitled HIV in Canada, Canada's Blueprint, was launched in 1990. almost a decade after the first AIDS cases were documented. The second strategy, Moving Forward Together, was released 8 years later and covered the period of 1998 to 2004. The third and final strategy, the Federal Initiative to Address HIV/AIDS in Canada, was released in 2004-2005. In addition, the Canadian Institutes of Health Research, Infection and Immunity, has one of the 4 partners in the strategy, developed its own strategy to help guide research. In general, the process of renewal of each strategy could be characterized as taking lots of time, effort, and resources, engaging an ever-increasing number of stakeholders and consultants in the process, never reaching a consensus on its content and direction, always generating lots of discussion, and leaving stakeholders feeling that they had been at least engaged in a process and aware of its content. This broad engagement has not occurred since prior to 2004. At the end of each strategy period, the progress made was evaluated, new strategic goals were set. Sometimes this process took a long time and resulted in lags in funding, which jeopardized ongoing research projects and NGO programs. Faced with persistent and coordinated years of lobbying by community and CAHR, in 2005, the Government of Canada made a commitment to provide permanent HIV strategic funding of $84 million annually, of which $22.6 million goes to CIHR for research. I now turn to examine the specific goals, structure, and leadership of the national strategy, and question whether some aspects may be serving as barriers to progress. The federal initiative identified 4 major goals: to prevent the acquisition and transmission of new infections, to slow the progression of disease and improve quality of life, to reduce the social and economic impact of HIV, and to contribute to the global effort to reduce the spread of HIV and mitigate its impact on the disease. My question to you is, how many of these did you know? How many of you are striving to achieve one of these in your day-to-day work? If so, which ones? Are there some that are getting insufficient attention? Are there new ones and more pressing ones? I ask, is it not time to revisit and revise them? What about the current organizational structure for implementing the strategy? How is it working? Are the 4 federal partner organizations working effectively to successfully implement the strategy? What about other stakeholders? The Federal Initiative to Address HIV in Canada identified 4 implementing partner organizations: the Public Health Agency of Canada, Health Canada, the Canadian Institutes of Health Research, and Correctional Services Canada. Each partner organization has a budget allocation, as indicated in Figure 1, and a specific role to play in addressing the epidemic, as indicated in Figure 4. As the strategy document indicates, quote, success depends on close collaboration among coordinating partners. How well is this working? Are there areas of overlap? Are there areas that are contested? Are some falling through the gaps? While these are not openly discussed, some of us have experienced the tensions that exist and their consequences. While the role and budget of the 4 organizations are clearly laid out, I think I skipped a section. Okay. While the roles are clearly laid out in the strategy, working relationships with the other key stakeholders are ambiguous. It is unclear as to what processes are in place for ongoing communication and coordination. According to the strategy, the implementing partner organizations are to work with other federal departments, agencies, provincial and territorial governments, non-governmental organizations, and other stakeholders to meet the strategic goals. The concept of pan-Canadianism recognizes that no organization and no government acting alone can ever successfully overcome the epidemic, that the work of many participants from many different sectors is needed to ensure the response to HIV. While a nice motherhood statement, how it can be effectively coordinated is less clear. When I think of the arrangement and the premise of leading together, what comes to mind at optimum is a fleet of ships sailing in the same direction. But realistically, I see the second scenario: ships and boats of different sizes, sailing different routes and going in different directions as time passes and communication is limited. More and more, I get the sense that no one is leading. With leadership comes responsibility. It's easier not to be accountable when there are lots of leaders. Funding mechanisms, norms, and goals of funding bodies influence what will be investigated and by whom. By distributing resources in a selected way among disciplines, investigators, funding bodies play a pivotal role in influencing the development of science. The requirements and conditions for grants and scholar awards are guided and vetted by bureaucrats, some far removed from the epidemic and research. We have come to accept these requirements and conditions as things that can't be challenged or changed, in part because there is no real mechanism for researchers to influence this. Most of the decisions by funding bodies and their advisory boards are made with much thought and deliberation, but at times their decisions have unforeseen negative consequences. When outcomes are examined, they're usually in terms of whether the organization's goals have been met. Rarely are the mechanisms, policies, and outcomes looked at with respect to unintended consequences or in relation to the impact on research overall, and at times their direct impact on the epidemic is not considered. Let me give you two concrete examples. When the Toronto Sexual Contact Study was coming to an end, I tried to apply to NHRDP for a scholar award to continue my HIV work. I was told that I should be applying to the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada, since NHRDP did not support social science scholars. SHRC indicated that they were not funding HIV research and HIV researchers. That was NHRDP's mandate. Each organization was guarding their limited resources, following their stated mandates and goals. The unintended outcome was that young social scientists who could have contributed to the HIV epidemic were turned away. Never known to be one to walk away from a challenge, I applied to NHRDP and was awarded the Scholarship Award, which supported my salary, allowing me to initiate a productive program of research. The second example is how changes in funding management can impact on grant application process and success. Prior to the formation of CIHR in 2000, HIV research was allocated into 4 streams and funded through 2 separate funding bodies, MRC, the Medical Research Council of Canada, and NHRDP. MRC managed the biomedical and clinical research streams, while NHRDP managed epidemiology and public health research, the nascent community-based research program, and infrastructure for the clinical trials network. When CIHR subsumed the research previously funded by MRC and HRDP, it unintentionally resulted in lower ranking and reduced funding success of health research, such as epidemiology, public health research, social sciences, which falls under the health services and population health streams now. This inequity occurred across all CIHR streams and not just HIV research funding, and was documented by Thorngate's study that examined the impact of the transition. Thorngate found that the medical review committees scored applications higher than the health review committees. This resulted in biomedical and clinical applications being ranked higher because they were in the same pool as and had a higher funding rate. Over the years, this resulted in a drop in number of non-biomedical applications, which in turn resulted in less funds being allocated to some research streams, which further reduced applications and resulted in fewer health service and population health studies being done. Similar effects were documented in Switzerland in a study examining social science applications and funding before and after its integration into the Swiss National Science Foundation. 6 years after the integration took place, the study concluded that while contributing to prevention, treatment, and care, HIV-related social science research does not flourish under current funding conditions. In 2005, when the last federal strategy was renewed, the Government of Canada, as I indicated, made a commitment to provide permanent funding of $84 million annually, of which $22.6 goes to CIHR to fund HIV research. The rest is allocated to the other 3 partner institutions, as shown in Figure 1. And Figure 2 shows the distribution of funds across areas of action. The $22.6 million that are given to CIHR are allocated across different streams of research. 42% is allocated to biomedical and clinical research, and a further 20% goes to fund clinical research infrastructure for a total of 62% of the budget. 22% is allocated to health service and population health research, and 20% to the community-based research. When I served on CIHR, I questioned the unequal distribution of funds across various research streams. Allocations are made based on decisions and commitments made in the early years of the epidemic, reinforced by review committees, as we just saw, and by societal norms and expectations, something that I will return to later. There are those who believe that a higher proportion of the strategic funds should be allocated to health service and population health research, which tends to generate knowledge that is specific to the context of the Canadian epidemic. This is the type of research that is not directly transferable from one country to another. If we don't do it in Canada, we don't have it, and thus don't have the critical information we need to better understand and control the epidemic. Whereas some research, such as vaccine and drug development, can be conducted anywhere in the world, and the results are universally applicable. As an industrialized and wealthy nation, we have a responsibility to contribute our fair share to this knowledge. But this should be within reasonable limits and not at the cost of other types of research. A while back, I showed you a slide of the goals of the federal strategy. I would now like to briefly touch upon how CIHR, Infection and Immunity, has adapted them and how their mission, vision, values, and strategic goals may be impacting on the HIV epidemic and the research that we do. As you can see, the overall mission is in keeping with the goals of the HIV strategy. They are to provide national leadership in support and facilitation of AIDS research, research capacity building, research partnerships, and knowledge translation. Their vision is not to end the epidemic, but in keeping with their mandate to position Canada as a global leader in research that has national and global impact on the epidemic. And I personally think that CIHR, Mark Ouellette, Jennifer, and staff have been doing a great job. While our understanding of the virus and how to manage it has increased dramatically, the epidemic and the amount of work has not been reduced. The population and countries affected have increased, the spectrum of issues has expanded, but HIV funding has remained relatively stable over the last decade. There are lots of competing priorities for funding besides research. Funding bodies have to build cost-sharing, co-funding partnerships, are spending more time evaluating the impact of the research, building in processes to make sure that research findings are known and can be consumed by consumers and frontline workers, that policymakers are actively engaged in the research process in an effort to ensure that research findings inform policy and programs, experimenting with different models of conducting research, team grants, multidisciplinary research teams, etc., tasked with not only building research capacity among those in academia, but also community members. As you can see, CIHR's goals are many and ambitious, and in turn, CIHR and other funding bodies are asking researchers to take more and more of these responsibilities on. No longer are researchers expected only to create new knowledge. While I've been a strong proponent of CIHR's strategic goals and have embraced and successfully juggled them, I'm beginning to wonder at what cost. Would we conquer the HIV epidemic faster if more researchers could truly focus on the creation of meaningful new knowledge? If we were allowed to do what we are trained and are driven to do? Are there not other mechanisms and other people who should be facilitating and working on achieving many of the other goals? As you can see, this octopus is happily multitasking, but has so far managed to cut off one tentacle, injure a second, and partially cut off circulation to its brain. We can only imagine what the results of the carpentry project look like. In a consumerism-oriented society, there's a tendency to measure success by counting how many. Our academic institutions and funding bodies base our success primarily in terms of peer-reviewed publications. The more we produce, the better. The quality and meaningfulness, though important, are more difficult to gauge. Assessing the impact of our work is tempered by forces beyond our control, including time. We as HIV researchers have a responsibility to do research and to produce results that are meaningful and useful. Maybe we should ask ourselves whether we become too comfortable and set in our ways in how we approach our research and what the expected impact is. I've been too busy multitasking to do a scientific assessment of HIV-related scientific publications and journals compared to other diseases. I do know that until the mid-1990s, I was able to keep up with the literature to some extent. I could hold by two fingers the abstract book from the first International AIDS Conference in Atlanta, Georgia in 1985, and that I now need two arms to hold the books from the 11th International Conference held in Washington in 2012. The first is 99 pages from cover to cover. The second set is 1,695 pages. I was feeling quite deficient in my abilities to keep up with my readings until a colleague recently sent me an announcement indicating that UNAIDS has created a new platform which will highlight HIV scientific advances for those finding it a challenge to keep abreast of new developments. According to UNAIDS, in 2012 alone, there were more than 14,000 scientific papers published on HIV. That is an incredible number of articles that were deemed to be making a contribution to science. So why do we continue to have so many new infections? The last structural factor I have time to touch upon is the importance of society's norms, culture, and expectations in shaping the allocation of research funding, what research is done, and what are deemed as scientific contributions. I've already mentioned the uneven allocations of funding across different streams of HIV research. And one might expect that the proportion allocated to particular research streams would fluctuate over time to reflect knowledge and the evolving epidemic. While they may fluctuate slightly, to my knowledge, the proportions have remained fairly stable over the last 3 federal strategies. The allocations have consistently invested more heavily in biomedical and clinical research streams than in health service delivery and population health. This is in large part reflects how we as Canadians and the Western world views health and disease. When Canadians think of health and disease, they think of basic and clinical science as the solution. While public health has received greater attention since SARS, few people are aware of the role of public health in screening, preventing illness, and even fewer are aware of the concept of health promotion and the social determinants of health and well-being. Even those who believe that the social gradients of health and understand the social environment forces that shape health think that they're too complex, too challenging to address in the short term, and that resources should be focused on the one-shot solution that would bypass the messiness of human behaviors and societal forces. It would be so much easier if a little one-time pill or shot could be administered that would stop the infection and cure all of those who are currently infected. It was not until 1998 that the national strategy formally acknowledged that only by addressing root causes of the HIV epidemic could we bring it to an end. This assertion has not resulted in additional reallocation of funding for this type of research. For the sake of time, I will not discuss this slide in detail. The point that I wish to make is that health service and population health HIV research in Canada today has been too focused on individuals and not on other structures that work outside of the individual to foster or impede health. We need to invest in this approach. Besides Western society's expectations that solutions to health problems, especially HIV, lie primarily in the hands of biomedical researchers, there are those who question whether the decision to position HIV research in the Institute of Infection and Immunity was influenced by these views and has continued to reinforce it. When the institutes were created, CAHR and NGOs petitioned to create an HIV research institute, arguing that many of the unique gains made by HIV might be lost or challenged if they were placed elsewhere. To address some of these concerns, in 2003, III created the CIHR HIV/AIDS Advisory Committee, better known as CHRAC, to ensure it was guided by a group with in-depth knowledge of all aspects of HIV research and the community. While the historic timeline is short, to date, none of the scientific directors of III and all of the chairs of CHRAC have had an academic background in biomedical or clinical research. None have backgrounds in health service and population health. That's not to say that the men, because they are all men, have not been supportive of these streams. They have, but they're not representative of them. And as they say, some of them are my own best friends. If we are like Juliet of Romeo and Juliet, we believe that it doesn't matter what the institute is named or what the background of its leaders are. But many of us are not like Juliet. In the early years of the epidemic, a decision was made that a proportion of the HIV strategic funds would be allocated to providing infrastructural support to help build research capacity in areas of need. The very first such initiative resulted in the creation of the Canadian HIV Trials Network, which was established in 1990. In 1998, the CTN was moved to CIHR, and $3.2 million per year was invested. 19 years later, in recognition of a systematic lack of Canadian capacity in health services and population health research, CIHR launched an open call, and 2 centers in population health and health services research were created for a total investment of $1 million per year. The 2 centers are known as REACH and the Social Research Center in HIV Prevention, SRC. I have the pleasure to be the nominated PI and director of the SRC, and the SRC is conducting research on how to develop viable and effective interventions that go beyond the individual level to examine and address more upstream distal influences on behavior, practices, and vulnerability. This work is extremely challenging, but worth pursuing if we are to build on the existing prevention approaches and to maximize impact. The role of social and behavioral sciences is also integral to the successful implementation of biomedical and technological interventions. While efficacious in trial, evaluating their effectiveness and making them effective outside of the controlled trial is challenging. I think it will take more than $5 million invested over a 5-year period for the 2 centers to leave a lasting legacy and overcome the systematic lack of capacity resulting from years of underfunding and the evolving nature of the epidemic. Many of the examples I have used today focused on research funding, which is located at CIHR, but that is not to say that other national, provincial funding bodies are excluded. Indeed, the transparency with which CIHR operates makes it easier to scrutinize. What are PHAC, Health Canada, Correctional Services doing with the strategic funds? The lack of transparency has crept in since the Harper government came to power. The culture of silence is slowly creeping its way into other organizations and institutions beyond the federal government. How are provincial funding bodies allocating funding? I see the creation of funding monopolies in which there are fewer opportunities for investigator-driven research, more and more directed funding under the name of strategic targeting really means control of what knowledge is produced and by whom, implying that researchers choose their research willy-nilly as they sit in their ivory towers looking at the passing clouds. In some cases, advisory committees to funding bodies, once a marker of openness and representativeness, are now used as a way to silence the voices. Some funding bodies are doing research and competing with researchers for funding. The HIV movement has been founded on the principles of speaking out without fear of reprisal. I feel our colleagues in government institutions who are not, I feel for our colleagues in government institutions who are not allowed to speak out. And I deeply dislike those who bully us into silence. The University of Toronto, with all its faults, and I'm one of its critics, even though it supports my salary, has a statement of institutional purpose, which is very inspiring, and sometimes we who work there forget it. It states that the most crucial of all human rights are the rights of freedom of speech, academic freedom, and freedom of research. And it affirms that these rights are meaningless unless they entail the right to raise deeply disturbing questions and provocative challenges to the cherished belief of society at large and the institution itself. So it's in this spirit that I have spoken out and will continue to speak out, even if it means jeopardizing my research funding. I encourage more senior scientists to do the same. Let's break the culture of silence. The primary goal of the presentation was to generate an open discussion, not to upset my colleagues and friends. There are many paths to moving forward, and during this presentation I have suggested a few of them. And for the sake of time, I will just do the focus on the bullets and not give you additional information. First of all, I think we clearly need to refocus our efforts and set targets to lower new infections. It's time to reinitiate a national discourse and agenda setting in order to refocus our efforts, even though it's a messy process, as I indicated. Let's take a good look at the unintended consequences of redefining the roles of researchers. Let's take the time to invest in scientific streams that have been chronically underfunded. Invest a small amount in research that identifies the structural barriers and facilitators to effectively implementing the strategy. Researchers, senior academic administrators, funding bodies, and members of review committees, whether it be grant, tenure, or promotions, need to revisit how to gauge scientific production so that quality is rated higher than quantity. And most of all, as I've indicated, we need to put an end to the culture of silence. Let's all continue to work together and do the great work that we've been doing. But let's not forget to take stock of where we are and where we want to be, and identify and remove the invisible and unintended obstacles that are in our path. I would like to thank the organizing committee and CAHR for this opportunity. Preparing this talk has forced me to take time to think about the past, the present, and the future. When I started to work in the field of HIV in March of 1984, I never dreamt how my life would change. I've been blessed to have worked locally, nationally, and globally with a committed group of people who have fueled my passion for research and critical thought. But I do have a dream, and I share it with Mark, and I didn't know, Mark, we shared a dream. And that dream, for me, has yet to come true. And the dream is that there would be no new infections in Canada before I retire. So let's hurry up and make my dream and all our dream come true. Like our colleagues in cancer research, let's recommit to conquer HIV in our lifetime. I would like to end by acknowledging and thanking Dan Allman, Caroline Goodbu, Robin Montgomery, Ted Myers, and Robert Remus for providing input for the presentation. People talk about the importance of the work-life balance. For most HIV researchers, our work is our life. In recognition of the sacrifice that our families make in supporting our distorted view of life, I want to thank my husband, Sid, who I still have him working, he's shooting photographs today, for his infinite tolerance. My son, Andrew, for turning out to be such a caring person, even though he didn't have a mother hovering over him for the past 30 years. And my beautiful 2-year-old granddaughter, Aria, for reminding me about the magic of life. And thank you all for making this trip so wonderful. Sorry, I might go over. Oh, well, thank you. That's wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, we have to go stand here. Okay. Mark, sorry, I don't want to slow everything up, but you know, it's the Mark Wainberg lecture. Right? Okay, great.
I now have the pleasure of introducing a person that changed the course of HIV in North America, Dr. Julio Montaner. Dr. Montaner is a professor of medicine and head of the Division of AIDS at UBC, where he holds the chair of AIDS research. He's the director of the BC Center of Excellence in HIV/AIDS and the past president of the International AIDS Society. An Argentinian transplant, he arrived in BC for an internal medicine residency in 1981 and never left. Just as the HIV epidemic accelerated, since then, in 3 decades in the province, Dr. Montaner has shown immense leadership and innovation, fought the disease stigma, and saved many lives. Dr. Montaner was one of the co-organizers of the International AIDS Society meeting in Vancouver in '96, a pivotal conference that introduced the effectiveness of HART, the triple therapy that is still the gold standard for the treatment of today's HIV. And he plays a key role in establishment access to HART, which turned HIV infection into a chronic but manageable condition and increased the life expectancy of people living with HIV. Dr. Montaner's research has also shown that HART dramatically reduces the likelihood of HIV transmission. And based on these results, he successfully engaged the provincial leadership to fund a pilot initiative called Stop HIV/AIDS, which is a groundbreaking strategy in turning the tide against HIV and becoming recognized worldwide. Dr. Montaner continues to be a tireless advocate for treatment as prevention and to lead guidelines for early initiation of HART, which aims to decrease HIV morbidity and mortalities. He authors more than 450 scientific publications in HIV, and he has won numerous prizes, and for the sake of time, I will just name a few of them, which is the inaugural Avant-Garde Award from the National Institute on Drug Abuse from the NIH in 2008, and in 2010, recognized Doctor of Science honoris causa from Simon Fraser University, the Order of BC, the Albert Einstein World of Science Award. It was really a good year for you. And most recently, the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal for contribution to the field of HIV/AIDS. As you see from the abridged introduction, his accomplishment, energy, and work ethic are incredible. But for those of us who are fortunate enough to know Julio, we know that the work won't be done until there will really be an HIV and AIDS free of new infection generation. We look forward for his remarks. Please welcome Dr. Julio Montaner. I hope to do that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Neora. Thank you, Bob and Mark, for offering me the podium today at CAHR. When I was approached to make a few remarks in front of you people, I thought, what am I going to come up with that can be really innovative, different, a real treat for you? And I thought, rather than me telling you about our work, which I suspect most of you are probably sick and tired of hearing me telling you about, I'm going to get my boss to tell you about it. And so I took the liberty to asking our friend, our Premier, to come in front of you and give you a few thoughts about what we have collectively done in British Columbia to try to address the problem of HIV and AIDS, so far quite successfully. It doesn't really matter what us as researchers are able to accomplish if we don't have the political support and leadership to transform that into reality. Our work is in vain. And for me, it really has been extremely gratifying to see that the fruits of our research can become a reality thanks to the support that we have been able to gather from our Premier. To give you a sense of how much importance she places on this work, as you know, British Columbia is almost imminently going into an election cycle, and yet Christy Clark, our Premier, has agreed to distract herself from her very busy agenda to come and say a few words for you. Please welcome the Premier of British Columbia, Christy Clark.
Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you, Julio. It is a great honor, honestly. Julio made it sound like I didn't want to be here, but I really did want to be here with all of you. I know that about half of you are from British Columbia, and I do want to say to all of you, everyone from across the country, but in particular, all of the researchers and academics who work in British Columbia, how profoundly gratifying it is for all of us to know that you've chosen to work in our province, and how proud we are of the work that you do and the contribution that you make to our society and making our province better, and the knowledge that the work that you do here is work that is going to benefit hundreds of millions of people all around the world. So may I just start with a big thank you on behalf of all of the people of British Columbia. You don't get to see them as often as I do. And I think if they knew what you were doing, they would get a chance to say thank you. You know, I see them a lot. I don't often hear thank you for the work that I'm doing, which is fair. But I think if they knew the work that you were doing, they would certainly take a chance to say thank you. So I do want to start by offering a thank you on behalf of everyone in this province. We have worked hard in British Columbia, all of you, and the government has done its best to try and support the work, in particular, the work that Dr. Montana has done. He has proven in the last 5 years what we can do when government is prepared to take ideas and research, knowledge, data, and execute on it and turn it into action. Not that we execute on it, but that we provide the support that it can be done. And that's the marriage that needs to happen between the people with the ideas and the plans, and then the people at the political level who have the money. To bring those two things together so that we can bring those ideas to life and solve real-world problems and save lives for people all across the province and around the world. That's one of the most important missing ingredients, I think, often in the work that you do. So we've worked hard with Dr. Montana. It was my predecessor, Gordon Campbell, who he went to see 5 years ago and convinced him on the basis of the data, with his own passion and his incredible rigor that he brings to everything he does, that the government needed to support the work that he was doing, he and his team. And he has proven that that investment is more than worth it. HIV infections in the 1990s here were over 900. Now, it's 248. We are the only place in North America, I think the world, that is seeing a consistent decline at such a rate. And we are very, very proud, Julio, of the work that you and your team have done. So we've begun with that, he's begun with that. And he and I have agreed that the next frontier is to take the work that he's done and the team have done and British Columbian researchers have done with HIV/AIDS and start to migrate that to other diseases that behave in similar ways in the population. So what about hepatitis? What about other sexually transmissible diseases? What about going after some of those other diseases that behave the same way and using the same model and proving that it can work in reducing infection in population, infection rates in populations in other diseases? That is the next frontier for us. And we are not going to stop here. 1981 was a great year for British Columbia because that was the year that Julio Montaner came to British Columbia and his wife wouldn't let him leave. And because we don't want him to go anywhere, we want to continue to support him because you guys are doing great work. You men and women here today are all doing great work. And we have so much more to do, not just for our province and our country, but for the world. And so, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much again for all that you're doing with all the passion that you bring to it every day. Yours isn't always the glory, although when you see the list of awards that you got, Julio, there seems to be some glory in it, I think. But yours is not, you do not do it for the glory. You do it because you care deeply about these issues. And all of us want to leave our lives, hopefully after a long one, knowing that we've made a difference. And I'm willing to bet that every single one of you is going to leave your life knowing with absolute certainty that you've made a tremendous difference. That's the way to live a life. Thank you very much for all you do.
Thank you, Premier. We really appreciate your support, and we can only wish that you could be an example, not only for the rest of the premiers across the country, but also for our federal government, who, as Liliana highlighted in her remarks, is long overdue to generate a new, vibrant, and revised national strategy. This is a problem that affects us all. We know what needs to be done. I'm not here to describe it for you. You will have enough time to deliberate about it in the next few days here at CAHR. But if we don't implement the results of our research aggressively and effectively and throughout the country, lowering the threshold for people to be able to access services and fighting against stigma and discrimination, which are so persistent and prevalent in our society, we're not going to overcome this problem. We have laws in this country supported by the federal government that represent a clear hindrance for us to implement the programs that we need to implement, whether it's harm reduction programs, prostitution laws, or the criminalization of sexual contact in people with HIV. This is unacceptable. If we don't revise our approach federally, we won't be able to tackle this epidemic successfully. BC cannot do it alone. And there is a pending assignment for the federal government when it comes to the First Nations epidemic. First Nations are 5 to 7 times overrepresented when it comes to HIV, and this is no way to treat our friends and brothers in the First Nations community. So we need a renewed strategy. We need it urgently. And I only hope that the federal government will take the leadership that Chrissy Clark in British Columbia has demonstrated and deliver on what, at the end of the day, is a very realistic goal of an HIV and AIDS-free epidemic. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Julio, and thank you very much, Premier Clark, for coming. See ya. Okay. Oh, well. I was going to make some wisecracks, but I'll hold them. So, and now I have the pleasure of introducing the 2013 CAHR Red Ribbon winner. Established in 2001, the Red Ribbon Award is presented annually by CAHR for outstanding service to the cause of research in a way that has increased our understanding of the treatment and prevention of HIV/AIDS while enhancing the quality of life of those living with the disease. CAHR is pleased to announce this year's winner is the Portland Hotel Society. For over 20 years, the Portland Hotel Society has worked to create innovative projects that serve the unmet needs of vulnerable people living in Vancouver's downtown east side. Historically, residents of the downtown east side living with addictions and mental health challenges have been excluded from mainstream housing, health care, and social services. The Portland Hotel Society fills the gaps in service left by that systemic exclusion, building spaces where community members can receive health care, engage in civic society, and gain social capital. Today, the Portland Society operates low-barrier housing projects, primary health care services, basic financial services, treatment programs, and drop-in services. In addition, they have developed a mandate to empower residents and clients to become peer leaders in their community. Everything they do, from the Portland FC street soccer team to operating a supervised injection facility, from the supportive housing projects to the dental clinic, is part of a comprehensive, holistic approach to serving the needs of this long-suffering community. From the Portland Hotel Society and to receive the Red Ribbon Award, Liz Evans.
We'd like to close tonight's ceremony, and thank you very much for attending. We think we've had some very interesting lectures and stimulating points of conversation, which I think will guide us in the next 2 days of a very busy conference. And it falls to me at the end of this to point out a few housekeeping issues. There are some important things for people who are presenting at this conference to remember. As Bob alluded to, there are going to be 2 sessions for posters, so posters will go up on Friday and come down at the end of the day, and the same will happen on Saturday. So if you can look at the slides just to make sure you know when the exhibit halls and poster sessions open, and the viewing schedule for the posters are also listed above. So we encourage people to take advantage of this and see the posters. We had a record number, as we've told you, and we've really tried to expand our hours to make sure everybody has a chance to see everything. The other thing that we are very excited about is Saturday night is the gala party, which is going to be held at the Rosewood Hotel, Georgia. We've seen it, it looks fantastic, and we really encourage people who haven't got tickets, hopefully I think there's still some left, so please join us on Saturday night. And please join us now next door for an opening reception. Thank you very much, and welcome to CAHR.